Welcome to the Learning to Love Our Land podcast, the podcast that invites you to reimagine you and your community's role in saving biodiversity. Over the past century, we've lost a significant amount of plants, wildlife, fungi, and more due to habitat loss and degradation, the spread of non-native invasive species, over-harvesting, climate change, and other threats.
We're here to help connect you with nature so that you're inspired to help regenerate the biodiversity we've lost by implementing conservation practices in your own yard and neighborhood. It's time we put good use to the land around us, and as ecologist Douglas Tallamy puts it, construct ecosystems that contain all their functional parts right where we live.
We're here to educate listeners about how they can go about making this a reality in their community. Together, Doug and I run a nonprofit called Love Our Land, whose mission is to bring life back to our neighborhoods, one yard at a time. Learning to love our land is our way of opening this mission up to a greater audience.
That's right. In this episode, Mike interviews Terry Puckett, Executive Director of the Grail USA, located here in Loveland. They discuss the Grail and Love Our Land's work to rid Grailville of non-native invasive vegetation and regenerate biodiversity on this sacred land.
We'll also talk about the fact that it's their 80th anniversary, and they have a lot of things going on over the next year to celebrate that milestone. So, without any further ado, let's get to it. Learning to Love Our Land starts now. So, Doug, it is the end of November. It is Thanksgiving week, and I know people have food on the mind. But I'm wondering, is there anything folks can be on the lookout for that is actually edible?
That's a great question, Mike, especially with this time of year. So most people are typically thinking about the turkey, the pumpkin pie, the stuffing, all those good fixins. But yeah, there actually are quite a few edible plants and mushrooms, which is what we're going to talk about out and about right now. So one mushroom that is actually, I'm going to start with my favorite edible mushroom of all, and it's getting to the time of year when it's not going to be out quite so much, but it's typically fall and spring that we see this one, but I'm going to talk about it anyways. This is chicken of the woods, Latoporus sulphureus, which is a almost neon orange and yellow mushroom, and we're going to have some pictures to the episode's going to be linked to some pictures so you can see what that looks like. It's a type of shelf mushroom, so it's not your typical cap and stem mushroom. It comes out of the side of dead wood, and it almost looks like a little shelf. And like I said, very brightly colored, and boy, oh boy, is it delicious.
You know, that's one that you see, if you're listening to this, you're probably like this. I'm just going to assume that you probably have an Instagram feed similar to ours, right? And this is one that I see probably the most common.
Yeah, it absolutely is one of the main mushrooms that I see on Instagram. Like I said, it's very conspicuous. Lots of people take pictures of it, not even knowing that it's an edible mushroom. They just see it and think, wow, this thing's gorgeous. It's otherworldly. And so this one it gets the name chicken of the woods because of the taste. If you just, sear it in a pan, you fry it up, saute it with some butter, salt and pepper, it tastes just like barbecue chicken. It's remarkable. No other seasonings are needed, and because of that, it's one of my favorites.
When does that start to show up, and what is the season for that?
So really, it's pretty much when the weather is not super hot. So you're not going to find it in the dead of summer typically, but you can find it in spring to fall, and like I said at the beginning, this is one that you're not going to see much longer. You won't get it in the dead of winter like some of the mushrooms that I'm going to talk about. But yeah, so that's right now. You can still you might be able to find it, but we're getting close to the time that you won't be able to find it for a while.
And not only that, there's a lot more foragers out there than probably ever before.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, seriously, when I first really started getting into foraging for mushrooms, I would see a lot of, dialogue on some of the Facebook groups and those pages, but it has just exponentially increased over the past couple years.
All right, what do we got next? What else?
So one that I actually posted about recently on our Instagram page, this is not only an edible mushroom but a medicinal one as well, is the lion's mane mushroom, Hericium erinaceus. And this doesn't really look much like a mushroom at all. You'd probably believe that it was a fungus, but if somebody told you it was a mushroom, you probably would be like, I don't know, that's pretty wild. It looks basically like a large white or creamy white colored blob with little frilly, like almost hairs on it. This is another one like chicken of the woods that grows out of the side of dead wood. And like I said, it's medicinal. A lot of the mushroom coffees and teas that are being sold online these days they have lion's mane mushroom in them, and that's because it's thought to help with cognitive functioning, alleviates anxiety, and quite a few other characteristics that I won't go into.
Can you just eat it or no?
So you need to cook it.
But it's not like chicken of the woods where you're eating it because of the flavor.
Well, actually, no. This one does have a pretty great flavor.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So this one, it is more of a seafood sort of flavor. So one of the things that I like to make are lion's mane, quote unquote, crab patties. So I just basically use like a tempura breading, kind of dice them up into pieces, roll them in the breading, and then fry them up, and it's remarkable. You make a ramelade with it and dip
Listen
it.
to you.
Yeah.
There you go. We got to start another cooking podcast.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing the flavor from these mushrooms. It does so much for the meal. Like I can see why people really get into cooking with mushrooms for that reason.
So let me just ask, could you find, again, people knew, I don't know much about much, that's why we're here. Can you find either of these at like jungle gyms? I mean, are these sold?
So the lion's mane, you can actually, I haven't seen it at jungle gyms, but you can oftentimes buy these little like boxes that have like a growing medium in them.
Right, I've seen
and
those.
they've been inoculated, and so you can grow them yourself. So I haven't actually seen either of those sold just as the mushroom itself. And chicken of the woods, I actually haven't seen sold at all. So
so you got to find it.
Yes. Yep. As of right now, at least, I think. Yeah. The next mushroom, and the name of this mushroom will give you some idea of the flavor of the mushroom, is oyster mushrooms. And we actually have a variety of oyster mushrooms that you can find in Ohio. And some of them are actually non-native. One of the prettiest is the yellow or the golden oyster mushroom. Very, very pretty, but it is non-native. It's not one of those species that I know of really that's out competing native mushrooms. But, that remains to be seen whether or not it becomes sort of an invasive species.
And just my ignorance. I don't know why I never thought that a mushroom could be an invasive species.
Yeah, so with mushrooms, we really don't think about that very, very much. However, we're very much aware of different fungi that are problematic. So the American chestnut blight, that's a fungus, or it's caused by a fungus. White nose syndrome in bats is caused by a fungus. So
Last episode, if you didn't listen, go back and
that's
listen.
right. But yeah, we don't really think about the mushrooms per se as being these non-native invasive species. So there are a number of them that they're kind of on a watch list.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but the oyster mushrooms, they get that name because they have a seafood like taste to them. The ones that we really are going to see this time of year are going to they're going to range in color from white to almost blue. So there's white, gray, some pinkish kinds. Not completely pink. There are pink oyster mushrooms that are a different species entirely. But yeah, the one we're looking at are the fall oyster mushrooms. And these are delicious. The thing you got to be careful about with them is they will stay on the tree, the dead wood, for quite some time. So if you get to some that have been on there for, a couple months, they may look good, but they've got tons of little beetles and everything in there. So not something you typically want to bite into. Yeah, right. And to deal with that, you basically, what I do is I soak them in salt water overnight, and that gets all the little beetles out of them.
All right. Before we move on to the next one, this is, this is always a concern, and we've had this conversation before,
Yeah.
But these people haven't heard it. The concern is poisonous mushrooms, and you've mentioned it's almost like very minority. The small amount of mushrooms are actually poisonous to humans, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But they're very, very poisonous.
Yes.
They can really put you through the ringer. So, how do people? People are listening to this and they're like, I want to go out with the kids and find some of these. What do you recommend? What app should they use, or should they take a book, or what do you recommend they go out with?
Yeah, so I absolutely recommend a field guide. Having a field guide, a book available to you, just because some of the apps that we have right now, like iNaturalist or Seek, they do really well at identifying certain organisms. They're not what I would use to identify a edible mushroom from a deadly mushroom. And so really, when it comes down to this, stick to the things that don't have any lookalikes. So morels are an example of a mushroom that they do have a lookalike, but they are different enough that you're not going to really be confusing them.
As long as you know that lookalike exists.
Yes. And actually, the next mushroom I was going to bring up is something that, unless you know exactly what you're looking at, I don't recommend collecting it and harvesting it. And that is the velvet foot mushroom, or enoki. It's very popular and widely cultivated for Asian cuisine. It is a gorgeous little orange mushroom. They grow in clusters, typically on dead wood. All these mushrooms that I've talked about so far, they grow on dead wood. And they have, the reason they get the velvet foot name is they've got these hairs, these little tiny, almost velvet-like hairs at the base of their stem. Which is different from the lookalike that they have, and the name of the lookalike is funeral bells. So that it says it right in the name. Yeah, and so there are some distinct differences between those two, but at first glance, both are small orange mushrooms growing out of dead wood. If you don't know what to look for, the key difference is you could make a mistake, and unfortunately, this is one that has toxins in it that are deadly to humans. So
Let's just stick with the chicken of the woods and the lions.
yeah. Absolutely.
No, but what are the key differences? I know people definitely look this up. We're not going to just take our word on this podcast. If you do go out and look for that, but just for those, what are the key differences between the velvet foot and the
funeral bells?
Bells.
So the big thing that I tell people to do is get familiar with how to take a spore print. And basically what that is, it's you cut the stem off right at where the cap meets the stem, and you set that on paper. What I like to do, because the spores can be different colors, is if I don't know what it is, I will take a dark piece of paper and then a white piece of paper, and I'll sit it right in the center so that half of that mushroom cap is on the white part and half is on the black, the dark part of the paper. Put a cup over it. Overnight, the spores are going to drop out. And in the morning, you'll be able to examine those spores and tell the color, which for these two species, it's the color that really matters. Velvet foot, or the enoki, have white spores, and the funeral bells have dark brown spores. And so if you say you have a cluster of mushrooms, you're not sure if it's, the velvet foot or the funeral bells, grab one or two of those mushrooms, leave the rest, take them home, do this spore print. If you see that they're white, okay, you're good to go. And if they're dark, obviously leave those alone. Maybe use it as an opportunity to look at those mushrooms and kind of really familiarize yourself with the other characteristics of those mushrooms that tell you one from the other. The velvet foot, when you're looking at it, it's going to have an orange cap, and that cap is going to look almost slimy. And you're going to get that light pubescent velvety hairs on the stem. Underneath the stem, it's going to be like pale gills. So those are the sort of characteristics you're looking for from a visual perspective for the velvet foot. The funeral bells are going to lack those hairs. There's not going to be any of that velvetyness. The gills themselves tend to be darker in color, and they don't typically have that same slimy appearance on the top of the cap. So, but truly, the best thing to do if you're not familiar with these two is get a field guide, or better yet, go out with somebody who's knowledgeable about them. The great thing is the great thing and the terrible thing is they oftentimes grow in the same type of habitat. So, from a teaching perspective, it's great because, I could be looking down at a log, see the velvet foot growing and be like, oh, here you go. This is the edible one. And then 10 feet away on another one is the funeral bells.
That's bad.
It is.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Wow.
So, yeah, like I said, good for teaching, not so good for a novice.
Yeah, if you're harvesting. Wow.
Yep.
So, I'm trying to think, and just thinking about mushrooms and somebody that may want to go forage, and you said we're running out of time for, the chicken of the woods. Is it like different seasons for mushrooms? Is it kind of like flowers? Is it like, okay, this season you're going to find these mushrooms, and this season, is that how it kind of works?
So yes, a lot of these, they flush in a particular season, or they that's when they're, the blooming.
Right.
We call it flushing.
These are the fruits of mycelia. Or how do you put that? How would you?
Yeah. No,
Oh, I nailed it.
The organism largely of the mushroom is the fruiting body of the organism, and largely that organism, 99% of that organism is underground, and so they do have seasons in which they'll fruit, However, they're not quite as reliable as, say, flowers, in that we know flowers are going to bloom from, this week of the year to this week of the year. Mushrooms, if the environmental conditions aren't quite right for them, they may not flush that year. So you could have, and a lot of these mushrooms that I've talked about, I have spots that I go back to year after year to these same spots, and because I know these mushrooms are there, and they'll just fruit.
And he's not going to tell you guys.
And I'm not going to tell you guys. I will tell you, though, if you're, in Loveland, actually all of these mushrooms, they're all around. Like, you just have to know, like, be looking at the right time.
I disagree. Doug is the expert, but let me tell you, I do look, and I don't find anything.
Oh.
So are you're doing, for those listening, we're doing a mushroom talk with Claremont County Parks, but that'll be, once this is posted, that'll be over with. Could we do a good time to do a walk maybe in December?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The great thing about mushrooms is there is a dip in the diversity that you're going to see, of course, in the winter. Okay. But you're still going to get things popping out. We get a lot of these seasonably warm days in the winter, and things pop up. And they're, it's very ephemeral. They may only be there for, a week or something, and then they're gone.
Now, Doug, we get to the point of our show where we talk about what conservation activities during this time of year, this month, can we do to help biodiversity?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to do this time of year is collecting acorns to grow oak trees. Oaks happen to be one of the really they're a keystone tree species in our ecosystems in North America. We have over 300 different species of caterpillars, of moths and butterflies that rely on oak leaves, in order to complete their life cycle. So,
and we talk a lot about Douglas Tallamy, right? And you're going to hear that throughout this. And he wrote a book. What was it called? Ooh, I put you on the spot. Something of Oaks.
Oh man, yeah. What is that?
We're going to keep this rolling. We're not going to cut this.
Let's see if I can pull this
No,
up.
You're not going to remember. We're both the nature of oaks. There we go.
The nature of oaks. Well, Mike, that book is called The Nature of Oaks.
I'm not cutting it. So there we go.
All right. So, yeah. Anyways, so growing oak trees is a fantastic way to support biodiversity. And one of the big things you have to do with oaks, and this is the same for a lot of seeds, but oaks in particular, is you need to know the difference between a good nut and a bad nut. If you spend, all this time and energy on getting these, acorns collected, and you find out that they're all bad nuts, yeah.
I bet you're going to tell us the difference between a good nut and a bad nut.
You got
please,
it.
Please.
I wish I had a good quip for this one.
Yeah. Please.
Doug's a good nut. Trump's a bad one.
No. Oh, here we're getting political.
Okay. We'll cut that.
No, we won't.
So what I do is you collect your acorns, and you're not going to be able to tell immediately most of the time whether or not you've got a good one or a bad one. You got to come back and do some processing. I will say that when you are collecting your acorns, I always give them a nice firm pinch squeeze. And if you indent that acorn at all, toss it to the side. It's no good. If you see any holes, like little tiny circular holes in your acorn, toss it out. It's no good. Basically, those acorns have had weevil larvae in them. When the acorns are first, the flowers really are, beginning to bloom on these trees, and they become fertilized. The weevil will lay the egg in that structure, and so that egg will start to mature with the acorn itself, and then the weevil will be able to consume the nut inside the acorn, and it is no longer viable. So let's say you've got your acorns, you get back to your house. What I do is I take and I fill a bucket, 5-gallon bucket, or could be smaller if you've got fewer acorns. Fill it with water, or about halfway with our water. Toss all the acorns in and let it set overnight. The ones that float, you can discard automatically. We know that the density's not right. They're just not going to be viable. The ones that sink and are there overnight, those are the ones that you can have pretty good confidence in. They're going to be able to germinate and grow. Now, not all of them will, but the majority of them should.
There we go. What isn't there another sink or float test that I'm thinking of?
An egg?
Maybe it's an egg.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can't remember how that one goes, though.
Okay, I just needed help figuring that what I'm thinking about, and I think that's it. So you guys can Google what that's about. But we're worried about the acorns right now.
That's
peeps.
right.
All right, Doug. So as our listeners are about to hear, I got to talk to Terry Puckett from Grailville, which is part of the Grail International Organization. And part of our conversation, we talked about getting people out here to birdwatch. I know me and my sons walked around actually yesterday here, and we saw tons of birds. But she mentioned that winter was the best time of year to catch birds and to go birdwatching. Is that true? Or what are your thoughts on that?
So this is a fantastic time of year to birdwatch, and there are a couple of reasons for that. This time of year, the birds that are sticking around, that are still here in Ohio, the resident birds, or even some of the birds that spend their summers farther north and they actually overwinter down, here in the States, they love going to feeders. A lot of them do. They're, the same insects that they're typically trying to go after are not available, and so they're trying to find berries from viburnum tree, shrubs, and winter berries, and they're also trying to find other mast and seeds from our native sunflowers and a variety of other plants. And so if you set out a feeder, this is when people are seeing lots of activities at those feeders. And really, it depends on what you want to attract, but you can attract a wide variety of species this time of year to your own backyard. This is a great time of year to start, especially with bird feeding. And one thing I'll say about bird feeding is if you've used these bird feeders in the past, it's really important that these things get cleaned out at the end of every winter, and right before you put them up. So what I like to do is, for some of them, I can put them right in the dishwasher on a hot setting. Others you hand wash with hot soap and water. And then for some, it's really good to use just a dilute bleach solution, 1 part bleach to 9 parts water. And the reason why we do this is because there are a lot of different pathogens that are spread to between birds at bird feeding stations. Unfortunately, this past year, the Ohio Division of Natural Resources actually had to put out an advisory about some weird, strange avian disease that seemed to be killing some of our birds that were visiting feeders. So they actually asked people to take their bird feeders down for a while. Eventually, it got to the point where they were no longer seeing those phenomenon anymore, and people could put their bird feeders back up. But this is a really important reason for washing those bird feeders, just because you've got birds that are traveling from all over to your bird feeder. And if one ends up having some sort of disease, they could
You're spreading it like
spread
anything
it.
else.
Exactly.
So the birds that are here now,
Yeah.
are they considered native birds, as I said to Terry? Is that what they're...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So even the ones that are, migrating south, those are native birds as well.
Oh, they're considered native if
Yep.
they consider their habitat.
If any of their habitat is within this range, they're
that's
considered
interesting.
native. Now there are
I
some.
learn from you every day.
There are certainly some species of birds here
That stay all year?
that stay all year, and yeah, they're obviously native. We have non-native birds, and we have non-native invasive birds. So, an example of a non-native bird that isn't invasive, that most people don't see unless you're in the plains, in the Midwest, are ringneck pheasants. So this is an Asiatic bird that was brought to North America, and this bird will never become an invasive species. It's really difficult.
It's a welcoming bird. It comes. It's made it's coming and integrated, assimilated. Is the word I'm looking for.
Yep, that's right. And then we have the non-native invasive birds like the house sparrow and European starling, which have very, very interesting histories.
And that's for a different
conversation. Yes.
So, what about coming out to the Grail? What are we going to see?
Yeah. So,
or in your wherever you live, what are we going to see right now?
Yeah, so right now, this time of year is actually, if you can get to wetlands or ponds or lakes, you're going to have a great time seeing waterfowl. Actually, this time of year is, the winter is the time of year to go out and see the highest diversity of waterfowl. And that's because a lot of those waterfowl spend their summers up, in, Canada, way up north. In some of the vast wetland systems up that way or on the coasts.
So when you say waterfowl,
yeah.
Again, I'm playing my role.
Yeah, no, that's
You talking about? I'm just thinking of two: ducks, geese, or maybe like seagulls.
So
what are we thinking of?
So ducks, geese, and swans.
Swans.
Yeah. But gulls actually. So one thing that I was taught by my ornithology professor very early on is there's no such thing as a seagull.
Okay.
That's a term that's been kind of used by a lot of people, but
mainly people at the beach.
yes, if you look through your, a bird guide, you will never see the term seagull. There are a lot of different types of gulls, ring-billed gulls, herring gulls, glaucous gulls, lots of different types. And, gulls in general, this is winter. We get to see some types of gulls actually too on like East Fork Lake. You can see this one species, Bonaparte's gulls. They are pretty prolific in the wintertime. You can see quite a few of them. But yeah.
So the time to go bird watching. One, we'd love to come out to the Grail. You can go out to marshes and things, but the best place for this time of the year is lakes and ponds.
I would say, yeah, if you wanted to get diversity, go to those lakes and ponds, because you're going to get around those lakes and ponds, you're going to get all the species you're going to get, like here at the Grail. Which, don't get me wrong, the Grail has some great stuff to see this time of year, especially since there is part of O'Banion Creek goes right along the property. So you can see things like belted kingfishers, which are really fun to watch. These are, birds that fish. They dive down into the water and catch fish. And they've got to do that year round. So you can see that, in the dead of winter. But one of the fun things that I was actually greeted by a group of eastern bluebirds that they overwinter here. A lot of times people think bluebirds migrate, and they don't. So we have, eastern bluebirds that right when you drive into into Grailville here, you'll see them, the nice bright blue color flying through the sky, which is really, really cool. Yeah, so, bird watching in the winter can be great, especially if you've got feeders available. But I'm going to say this, if you want to have the ultimate bird feeding area and the bird watching area, you can have that right in your own backyard. And the way you do it is how, Mike?
Native plants.
That's right, native plants. And so those native
It's going to
plants...
come back around every episode, people. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here, yeah. And so, these native plants are, they're going to be a source of seeds. So things like purple coneflowers, native thistles when we think about American goldfinches, native sunflowers, or we think about softmass like berries from native dogwoods, our native bittersweet, native viburnums. There's so many options out there for you, and really whatever you choose is going to be great. It's going to be better than the current situation. And so if you want to truly have a great bird watching experience, grow some native plants, and if you build it, the field of dreams, if you build it, they will come.
Talking about birds, you didn't even know it, did you, people? And now, as Doug and I just discussed, you get to hear the conversation I had with Terry from the Grail. And just to let you know that the Grail is an international organization. And when we refer to Grailville, that is the property that the Grail owns. We're going to talk about the 80th anniversary of the Grail. And we're also going to talk about some of their new initiatives that they have to celebrate that anniversary. And one of them is concerning us, Love Our Land, and we're very excited about it.
Thanks for having us back on to the podcast. I just wanted to share some great information that is coming out. And the biggest thing is that we are kicking off a year-long celebration of the past and build for the future as the Grail is celebrating its 80th birthday in 2024. So you're going to be seeing a lot of information over the next 365 days geared towards that milestone. So that's our big news right now.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Got a few things we can announce already. The first is that, as everybody knows, we've started a partnership with Love Our Land to remove invasive species, not just from the Grail property, but Love Our Land works all throughout the community. So together we have worked with a senior at Mount Notre Dame High School for her capstone project, and her project was to design a greenhouse that we hope to build here at the Grail property outside of Loveland in 2024. And the main purpose is to grow those native species necessary to replace all those invasives we're removing.
Right.
As you know, if nature abhors a vacuum, you take out those invasives and they'll just come back if you don't replace them with something else. So the goal is to grow this greenhouse that will have those native species, trees, shrubs, some other understory plants that we will use here at the Grail property, but also that Love Our Land can use in their projects across the greater community. So that's sort of the number one purpose. The secondary purpose is to provide a space for education of the community. Love Our Land will be able to come out, do some educational programming in the greenhouse with those plants. The Grail could also host education pieces. So not just replace what we're taking out, but share the message of how important planting, rewilding is for the planet. And it's something that we can all do. Our end goal is that hopefully within 3 to 4 years, we will be producing enough in the greenhouse that will be able to do sales to the greater community, folks who are rewilding their yards, for example. So that's our big project.
Yeah, and we are very excited about it at Love Our Land. I'll tell you what, just for you guys to partner up with us and to make it part of your long-term strategy is just a great example for everyone around. Like you said, your doors are open so people can come and see. We can do events here, but also just walking the land and watch it transform over the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. This is a long-term project. Something like this is not a snap of the fingers,
Nope.
1 weekend volunteering. This is an ongoing commitment that, we really felt, and we're inspired by Love Our Land to tackle this issue. Some of the invasive species were not of our making, those darn calorie pear trees that blow everywhere. But here it is, a good example of what we thought was good in the past that we've learned is not a wise choice. The multiflora roses, Grail early years, they had animals on this property. And what was considered a good conservation measure was not to cut down trees to make fences, but to grow hedgerows that would keep the animals in. And they planted multiflora roses, which have taken over large swaths of the property. But it does show that what we thought, what we knew, it changes over time.
And I think you bring up a great point that people need to understand that this is really new information overall. And I think that sometimes when especially in Love Our Land and we talk to people in their yards, or Doug does a consulting for somebody, they almost feel bad or embarrassed, and they shouldn't.
No.
This isn't something that probably even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I would say most of the public did not realize the issue that one of invasive species, but two, just of what we're mainly planting in our yard is, you might as well be plastic almost. It doesn't bring life. But that embarrassment needs to go. I mean, it's all about everybody. Nobody had this intent. Even the people that brought these over from Europe 100 years ago, it was all good intent, nothing to be embarrassed about. We're all moving forward together.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point is also that as time changed, knowledge changed, but also needs changed. When folks were bringing what we now consider invasives over, they were brought for a purpose, right? And our lives have changed. Our lifestyles have changed. Even though dreaded calorie pears had a purpose and intent when they were planted, I don't think anybody realized just how out of control they would get. But we know better now. What's the saying? You know better, you do better.
Right.
And so we are excited. I use that so often, but we are energized by this long-term project. We know it's going to be hard work, but if we can be that resource, if we can be that example, I think that's important for the community to see. So to that end, in addition to the greenhouse, which we would love to have, businesses out there looking for great sponsorship opportunities, this could be one of those. I will say that sponsorships could include naming and claiming rights across the property, owning sort of space, an acre, 2 acres that you can name, and then help us rewild that.
Yes.
If you're a business and you've got your volunteer team, being able to see the whole project through. Step one is, could you come and help volunteer, take some of those out, but then also help us replant it. See how it changes as your involvement makes possible.
And I think that with that too, this is a sponsorship where you're going to see the difference that you make. Sometimes there are a lot that you do, but this one you definitely will see it over time, and that's important for the community. And if you can put your name on that, Even better.
So that's one thing. The second is we are launching monthly volunteer days. So this is an ongoing project, and many people believe that the Grail and the activities at the Grail are a summertime space. And what most people don't know is that so much of what we do on the land is year round. There are tasks we need to do every fall to ensure that what rises up in the spring actually happens.
Right.
There are activities in the fall and winter that are best performed then. I will tell you, our summer crew worked very hard at removing calorie pear trees and bushes in the summer. That would have been a lot easier to remove in the winter when there are no leaves.
Right.
So we're launching in this time of cold the monthly volunteer days that will be promoted on our social media, that we are welcoming individuals, families, groups, business teams to take part in. Each month will have a targeted activity, but that may change a little bit. November 4th was our first, and that focus was on calorie pear tree removal. Upcoming volunteer activities could include, we have to do some work around the agroforest, mulching those baby trees to help them grow, some other activities. So there is a lot that happens, and we would love to have folks come out and be active in the space. Another really weird point about winter activities that I did not know before a couple of years ago is that birds are the most active in the winter.
Wow.
And now is the right time for bird watching.
Huh.
I know.
I had no idea.
I did not know that. Most of our birds apparently do not fly south for the winter, despite all those cartoons you saw as a kid showing that happening.
Right.
That is not what happens.
Not for our native birds, right?
Not for native birds. So, again, another activity in the wintertime here at the Grail for families is our competitive bird watching activity. You can download that from our homepage or stop by the office when we're in to grab a copy. And it's a fun way to get out and be interactive, not just passively walking through, but really stopping to look to see what life is there. Again, that long term, bringing back those native species plants is also going to increase that biodiversity. So It's a great way to check on that. And then one of the last things I want to bring up that is coming up really soon, launching the Saturday after Thanksgiving, so November 25th, the indoor labyrinth will be open and the International Crush exhibit will be up. So every year, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, we launch these, and there's a reason. That's because it's winter and it's cold, and Thanksgiving family comes to town, friends come to town, and after about 3 days, either you or they need to get out of the house. So on the Saturday after, the oratory will be open from 9 a.m. till 12 noon for those who want to come and meditate on the indoor labyrinth or check out the selected crushes in that exhibit. And from that point, they will both be open Monday through Friday, 10 to 4, without any reservations or appointments. Times outside of that can be by appointment, or watch our social media, because as we get volunteers who are available, we will do pop-up hours. So there might be a pop-up hour on a Sunday from noon to 2. Watch social media for those, because we will announce those every week when the pop-up hours are.
Doug and I would like to thank you all for taking your time and listening to episode number 2 of Learning to Love Our Land. It takes all of us to make a difference, and it takes all of us to bring back life to our neighborhoods, one yard at a time.